scoring rubric. And so on the scoring rubric, we have that vocabulary. That's what you should have done on your own. And now we're going to move on to these steps, the written, or either you can write your steps out, or if you want to, you can also actually write out the example, and put it in the numbers, which is what I would do. I struggle with putting it in those steps, okay? And then after this, if you're not quite finished with it, you can work on it for a little bit longer, but then you're going to want to make sure it's submitted before you do your test, okay? So these problems, again, we're going to do them together, but it's your job to put them on your one-pager however you want. If you also are looking at a problem and you're like, I don't want to do that one, I guess that's up to you. All right, so for this first one, this is adding polynomials. So this goes back to our very first lesson that we went over. And so this one will be really good to write down because it's been a while since we've done it. In this one, we don't use the area model or the distributive property because here we're just adding. That distributive and area is only for multiplying. So I'm going to write down the steps on the side for people who like to write their steps out in words. I'm not a huge word person, so there's probably a better way to phrase these. But our first step is going to put our like terms together. So we're going to look at this problem and we're going to put those like terms together. And we're either going to put them together with a plus or with a minus. And that plus or minus comes with, are we adding the polynomials or are we subtracting the polynomials? And in this case, the thing between them is that adding. So we're going to be adding those polynomials together. Okay, so when we look at this, which parts are like terms between this first polynomial and the second? Which ones can we put together?
Three x squared and 6x squared.
Awesome, we have that 3x squared and that 6x squared, so I'm going to put a plus between them. And we know those are like terms because they both have that x squared. What else can we put together?
X and 3x.
Good, that 2x and that 3x. And when you put that 3x, we really want to pay attention to that minus in front of it. So we're going to say 2x. We're still going to use this plus that's in the middle, but then we're going to make that a negative 3x. Okay, and then what else can we put together?
Negative 9 and 11.
Yeah, negative 9 and 11. And those are constants because they don't have a coefficient. Or I'm sorry, they don't have a variable. All right, so step number 2, after we put those together, is now we are going to add them or subtract them. So I'm going to put add, subtract. A good word for adding and subtracting is like combining. So we're actually going to put those things together. And when we do that, we work with mainly the coefficients or the constant. But I'm going to put coefficient here. So the number in front of the variable. So for 3x squared plus 6x squared, we're going to add the 3 and the 6. So 3 plus 6 would give us 9. And then here's kind of the big difference from that multiplying stage that we've been working on, is when we combine those like terms, that variable part stays the same. So it's just 9x squared. So then for our green, we have 2x plus negative 3x. So we're doing 2 plus negative 3. And when we have a positive and a negative, we really subtract. So 3 minus 2 is 1. And then we have more negatives. So negative 1. And then we just keep the x. That variable doesn't change when we add or subtract. And then in our last one, we have negative 9 plus 11. So again, we have a positive and negative, so we're going to think subtract. 11 minus 9 is 2, and we have more positives. So our last step is now we are going to write it in standard form. So remember that standard form is where we start with the most or the highest exponent and we work our way down. So our highest exponent, the one with the biggest exponent here, is that 2. So we're going to do 9x squared. And then after x squared, it comes that x. So we have a negative 1x. I always like to put in a plus, but you could do a minus 1x or a plus negative. And then remember, if it's just a 1x, we can just write that as x. And then we have that 2, so plus 2. And that's our final answer. So if you are writing this down, I'm going to give you about 45 more seconds to write that down if you need to. If you are doing a digital version and you need to take a quick screen grab, you can screen grab it, but I also want you to type something in there that shows me that you're not just taking exactly what I did, that you're actually putting some thought into it. And then we have 3 more problems we're going to talk about. And then you will have the rest of the time to finish your one-pager and take your test. All right, so next problem, we're going to be subtracting polynomials. And we're actually going to use the same steps as adding. So I'm just going to copy and paste my adding steps because honestly, I'm lazy. All right. So our first step is going to be to put like terms together. And this time when we look at our problem, we have 2x to the 5th plus 3x to the 4th plus 2x squared minus 5. And then we're subtracting the other polynomial, 6x to the 4th plus 9x squared plus 3x minus 4. So when we write them and we pair them together, and we put those like terms together, we're going to put a minus between those two because this time it says subtracting in between. So again, we're looking for those like terms. So what like terms do we have here? What and what can be put together?
3x4 and 6x4.
Good. So that x to the 4th goes with that 6x to the 4th. So I'm going to start with that 3x to the 4th. And again, I'm putting in that minus 6x to the 4th. Why did you skip the 2x to the 5th?
Because the exponent on the top doesn't match the other exponent.
Yeah, there's no like terms. So I'm just going to let this kind of chill here. But I'm going to do a little arrow here to remind myself, don't forget that when we write our answer. Because when we write our answer, we're going to want to bring that down. All right, what other like terms do we see?
2x2 and 9x2.
Good, so we're going to put those together. Negative 2x squared. And again, we use that minus sign, minus 9x squared. Are there any other like terms?
-5 and -4.
Good. Now with that -5 and that -4, it's going to be really important that we think about this as a negative. Whoops, didn't mean to draw a little guy there. All right, so -5. Again, we're going to use that minus sign and then -4. So some people like to use parentheses here to show that that's a minus sign and that's a negative sign. And again, we have that 3x. This 3x doesn't have any like terms. There's nothing else that has just an x. So again, I'm going to just kind of mark that to remind myself, in the end, I'm going to want that in my answer. So that was step 1. Step 2, we're now going to add or subtract or combine those coefficients, those numbers in front of the variables. At this point, if you need to use a calculator, I would be totally fine with that. If you struggle with this part, that's okay. Use a calculator, get your way through it. All right, so 3 minus 6. I know 6 minus 3 is 3, but we did the smaller number minus the bigger number, so it'll be negative 3. And then we keep that variable, x to the 4th. For the green, we have negative 2x squared minus 9x squared. So we're going to do negative 2 minus 9. So this tells us to start at negative 2, go backwards 9 more. So we're going to end up at negative 11x squared. And then for that last one, remember when we're subtracting a negative, that actually tells us we could write it as negative 5 plus 4. So if we start at negative 5, go 4 towards 0, we'd end up at negative 1. All right, last step is now to write in standard form. So which part should I start with? Which one has that highest exponent?
What was the question?
If I write my final answer in standard form, I want the term that has that highest exponent first.
Oh, the 2x 5, right?
Yeah, good one. You remember we had this 2x to the 5th that we didn't use yet. So that's going to be in our final answer. And we didn't use that because it had no like terms. So that 5 is the highest exponent. And we're just going to work our way down. So 5, 4. So we have negative 3x to the 4th. And then we would have x to the thirds. I don't see any x to the thirds. So we're going to move on to x to the second. So 5, 4, 3, 2, negative 11x squared. And you can write that as a plus negative 11x squared or a minus. After x squared is just the x. So again, this is the part where we have to remember we just had that 3x chill in there. Now with that 3x, it looks like it's going to be positive, but secretly hiding out in front there was that minus sign. So it's actually minus 3x. And then last we have that constant, that negative 1. All right, so again, if you need to copy down any of those parts, if you need to take a screen grab, if you're doing a digital copy, if you're taking a screen grab or a screenshot, make sure that you are adding something of your own to it. I want to see that you put some thought into it, not just me. So maybe put a little caption on it saying, what was this about, or what stood out to you, or what part you need to remember. And we have 2 more problems. And then we'll get started. This next problem, I think a lot of you are feeling really comfortable with, but I do want to talk a little bit about it because of your test, because you have a test today. I don't know if I've said that. Just kidding, I've said it like 20 million times. All right, so the next one is multiplying polynomials. And so here's the thing about your test is it is going to ask you questions about both the area model and the distributive. And what's interesting about this class is you guys were actually pretty 50-50. My other classes, most people like the area